Hello and welcome to the first full panel of Spotlight Indie's big weekend. We are so excited to have you. We're so excited to have some amazing guests with us to start us off. And what better way to start us off with the big weekend with a panel on beginnings. So we're going to talk about writing better beginnings today. So if we can begin by introducing our lovely panelists, we're going to go around clockwise as I always do with these things. So Jenny, could you please introduce yourself and let everybody know about you and your stuff?
Hi, I'm Jenny J. Hannaford that I publish under. I am author of the Black Hinds Wake series, Fly Past of the Skin, and the currently, hopefully later this year, finished O'Leary Gates series, so Fly Past of Gates of Hope.
Amazing.
And a number of short stories scattered all over various anthologies and places. So, yep.
So lots of beginnings to talk about.
Lots of types of beginnings as well, with very different types of books, yes.
I look forward to that. Phil, could you please introduce yourself for those of us who might not know you?
Indeed. Hi everyone. I'm Phil Parker, and I'm the author of the books that I very carefully have made sure are behind me. And I haven't rehearsed this at all, but yes, I've got my canvas prints up there, and pride of place at the moment are my British Bureau for the Arcane series, my fantasy noir stories. And but they are just sort of part of it, and just very much like Jenny, a whole variety of different styles that I've experimented with over the years, and so that's why I've got things to say about beginnings of stories.
Perfect. Anna, could you please introduce yourself and your stuff?
Hiya, I am Anna Tizard. I have a very strange podcast called Brainstorium, where I brainstorm stories using a surrealist word game called Exquisite Corpse. And I write stories and novellas and novels based on the results. Here's a couple of, it's one of my very pretty cover designs. I'm a very talented cover designer. But yes, contemporary fantasy and dream punk, but based on the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse.
Amazing. I love the, pulling your ideas from that kind of, the Exquisite Corpse is fantastic. I like that kind of stuff. And Alethea, how about yourself? What about you and your works?
So I'm Alethea Lyons. Y'all can call me Thea, then you don't have to worry about the pronunciation. And I am the author of the Dark Supernatural Seer of York series, which has 2 full novels out and a collection of short stories. And I have another book coming out in less than a month. So that is exciting. Yeah. I also write short stories, which are in anthologies on KU, and a lot of cyberpunk fantasy.
Amazing. So really, that's a nice spread of those two. That's 2 very different genres that, well, not very different. I suppose they're not quite literary, but they feel very different vibes, I think. Perfect. So this panel, as I say, is to talk about beginnings. So the brief description we've got is that we all want to get off to a good start, especially with our stories. So for this panel, we've gathered some amazing indie authors to talk about what makes a good beginning for a story. So we're going to pick your brains to set all of you lovely viewers off on the best beginning for your writing. So to start off at the beginning, can you tell us about your favorite beginning, whether that might be a beginning of a chapter of a book or like your favorite opening line? I'm just going to throw that out to the digital room for anybody who might want to leap on that.
I'm really stereotypical here. I'm really sorry. I've got like a pile of beginnings next to me, right? I've got books open with beginnings written from 1875 through to current day, and the change is significant. I was like, I'm not going to end up first, so I'll have a backup plan. But I'm going first, so I'm going to kidnap it, I'm afraid.
Absolutely.
So it is important when killing a nun to ensure you bring an army of sufficient size. For Sister Thorn of the Sweet Convent, Lano Taxis bought 200 men. And obviously that is a very well-known quote of Mark Lawrence's Red Sister. Yeah. And that's probably my favorite opening line, I have to say. Although I will say, if we're going indie, Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons has probably my favorite opening page. I'm going to leave that in case someone else actually wants that bit. I won't spoil it.
If I Jen, you and I are so similar in so many ways. I realised this before because I've done exactly the same thing, and sort of created a whole list of my sort of favourite openings. I've put them into categories though, because one of the things that I wanted to say at some point during this chat is that when I started my writing course, my tutor at the time, the very first task that she gave us was to create the opening sentence for our novel that had to actually do one of three things. It either had to introduce the protagonist, or it had to set the scene, or establish the tone of the book. And you had to do it in under 20 words. And that discipline has stayed with me ever since. I always do that. And so it's the sort of thing that's influenced some of the things that I've chosen. There's a lovely book called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, Caitlin Doherty, I don't know if you know it. And she opens the story with, a girl always remembers the first corpse that she shaves.
Yeah.
And the reaction is just gorgeous there.
Yeah.
What was the I love this one. This is a real it's from The Word Exchange by Alina Graydon. Again, I don't know if you're familiar. On a very cold and lonely Friday last November, my father disappeared from the dictionary.
I love that.
Yeah,
great.
those are great.
Isn't it good?
Yeah.
I'm a little worried that there seems to be a bit of a theme with the lines we've picked, because I did actually limit myself to just two or three. But on the older scale, the first one that occurred to me as just one of my favorite opening lines generally is from A Christmas Carol. Marley was dead to begin with.
There is a theme.
That's the scene.
Wow.
But I did pick more modern ones, one dark and one not so dark. So there's a novella that's come out. I think it came out at the beginning of this year, but I art read it last year, In This City Where It Rains by Lindsay Kroll. Tare House sits at the edge of the city's memory on a cobbled street by an ancient cemetery where dead leaves rustle, and the only birds that speak their secrets to the stillness are crows, rooks, and magpies.
Lovely.
But I did also bring a cozy one, just so we had some variation. I have a physical copy of this one. And again, I think it's just a lovely setting up of character, like you were saying, to set the scene or the character. Given that he'd wanted a romantic evening watching the fireworks, bailing on his date 5 minutes before midnight wasn't the smartest move. And I think that actually is a good summation of the character.
Amazing.
That's really nice.
Yeah. I've been a bit odd by choosing just the one because I was worried about picking too many, and then I realised there was one particular book I bought years ago from a bookshop where it was simply because of the first couple of lines that really grabbed me. It's a book. It's called Journey by Moonlight. I don't know if you can see that, by Antal Zerb, who is a Hungarian writer. And it's quite an odd book. It's actually literary fiction, but it's got some very strange existential stuff going on. It gets a bit wild. So it just starts off, on the train, everything seemed fine. The trouble began in Venice with the back alleys. So to me, it just exemplifies the whole thing about beginnings, where there's a promise. You're sort of promising something that's going to happen later. It's like planting a seed of what's going to happen later. And this guy who's just kind of riddled with inadequacies and anxieties, and he's doing a sort of dum-de-dum, everything will be fine right at the beginning. You're like, no, it's really not. And you just get totally sucked in for that. So it's just kind of like putting it out there, knowing what's going to happen next, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. I think they've all got all those first few lines to have. Yeah, doing those 2 or 3 categories that you were saying, Phil, but also there's this huge element of intrigue, I think, to a lot of those as well. You know, it's like, why do you need to bring an army of sufficient size to kill a nun? You know, in what manner is she shaving corpses? And you know, why is he bailed on his date 5 minutes before midnight? I think that's a really, I'm glad we went through that and picked some favorites, because I think that, yeah, that's a really clear way, I think, to show what a good beginning is. You know, it's got some, got showcasing a microcosm of the story, which is what I quite like about some beginnings, is trying to have that small pocket of like promise of what the story's going to be, and show you, yeah, what it could be, but also what it hopefully is. So that's a nice way to start with some starts. So talking about beginnings, they're always at the beginning, but when exactly is the beginning? This is something that I kind of have struggled with some of my writings, is that you always hear a lot of advice about starting the story as late as possible, so that you're not, you know, writing 3 years of backstory about your character and then sort of starting the story that should really, you know, in chapter 47, when actually 47 should be chapter 1, kind of thing. And I struggled with that a little bit and almost went too far in the other direction when I was writing my first book, and I just got really stuck, but actually needed like an extra chapter before I thought the story started to give some more context to what was happening. And that really helped me. So how do you sort of draw the line, or like hone in on that point of like, well, this is where the story starts. This is when I should start my short story or book or whatever it might be.
I had that same problem with the book I was just showing, The Hiding, because when I first wrote it and was sending it to beta readers and querying it even, I started it at what is now chapter 2, which is actually the antagonist's point of view. And honestly, I still kind of like it starting there because it's very creepy and mysterious, but people wanted to be grounded in the main character first. So I had to add another short chapter before that so we could see who she was and what her setting was and her link to what was about to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one. Beginnings are... I rewrote the beginning of Gates of Hope, which was the first book I wrote, even though it wasn't the first book I published. That first beginning and that first chapter must have been rewritten, reworked, rearranged 10, 15 times easily. And I wanted to put chapter 2 first in a similar way. Still wanted that chapter 1 there, but I wanted them swapped. But all my feedback was very much no, keep chapter 1 where chapter 1 is, because that is the main character. And I'm like, well, I didn't realize he was. I thought that one was. But yeah, okay. So I know, if I'm honest to myself, that despite that working is still very much my weakest first chapter of any of my books, despite all of that. I'm very aware of that. It's a slow book, but it builds a lot about the world. And it's an incredibly complex world. I just think you get better at knowing where to start the more you do it. As you say, sometimes you groundwork the characters, sometimes you might brainstorm them. Sometimes the start is that moment, that spark of inspiration that hits, and you write that first line. And like Phil said, and that first line you write, that is now it. That is now the first line. That is the beginning, because that is the moment. But I'm controversially opposite to, I think, what a couple of you say. I do not like my first line to tell too much of the promise of the book, especially if it is going to give away a twist, a spin, something too much about the end. That's my personal preference. I know other people like it. For me, I'm like, oh, right, okay, so I already know that's going to happen. Cheers. When I read it, I don't actually like that. But I know there are lots of people who do. So it is a bit of a taste for different people. But I think for me now, it's when that spark hits, that moment. The newest thing I wrote, the opening scene, that very first line that I wrote, is the main character. It's her introduction. It's her doing something. And Alex has read this, but that first line was literally the first thing I wrote about that book. And that will not change no matter what else happens in that book. So
Yeah,
I think that comes with experience.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I completely agree with you, Jen, that for me, it's all those things, but it's very much the spark that does it. I'm going to go back to my writing tutor again, because it's only just as I was making notes about this session today, that I hadn't really sort of thought about that course for quite a long time. It was back in 2016 that I did it, so we're talking 10 years, so long time. But one of the second task that she made us do after we'd done the first task of that opening sentence was we had to write the first 250 words. And the task force, she said that we all had to create 250 words that completely hooked the audience and the publisher and the literary agent, whoever it was that you were sending the book to. It had to hook them in those 250 words. And if it didn't, then she said, I'm failing you. And we all had, absolute mental breakdowns. This was very early on in our, sort of beginning, but it really had this dramatic effect on shaping a lot of us, because a lot of us stayed in touch afterwards, and we've all found the same thing, that it's that 250 words that really you need to be so clear in your head as to what you're doing. And that spark is that Jen's talking about is where it began with me. If I illustrate an example, because it came out of this writing course, when I wrote The Bastard from Fairyland, my opening statement to that the opening sentence was, there were fairies at the bottom of my garden and they were torturing someone. And that set the tone more than anything else, because then what I then did for the rest of that 250 words was I described the torture. And that, as Jen just said, it doesn't tell you anything about the rest of the story in many ways. It just hooks you that, my God, this is going to be a violently bleak, grim, dark book. And that's what I wanted it to do. Thankfully, I got all that out of my system, and none of my books are like that any longer, I hasten to add. But my point is that I think that 250 words must hook the audience in and establish something about the tone that gets everybody really intrigued by the time you've got to the end of that first page.
Yeah, that's so true about the tone, setting the tone. I completely agree with that. I mean, I was thinking more about how, so I often find myself referencing a book called Plot and Structure, which does what it says on the tin, by James Scott Bell, because he talks about the whole structure of a novel as being a disturbance and two doorways of no return, which I understand is like the first of those is the equivalent of the inciting incident. And he sort of says within the first fifth of a novel, that's generally the best place to have your doorway of no return. So it's the beginning of the journey that the character's going to go through, where that they really are forced into a situation that they can't get out of. So that's really where it starts. And people often talk about, oh yeah, it is good to have action and be in the middle of something in the beginning of a book or a story, but at the same time, I think, especially when you talk about like setting the tone, you've got to it helps the reader sort of become engaged if they get a sense of what is the general norm, like what is the normal state of play for this character. But there's something wrong, something's not quite right. It's the seed of something that's of this conflict, rather than throwing them straight in there. So once you do then move to I suppose the core conflict and stuff really starting to happen, then the readers had time to kind of get used to the protagonist and sort of get a sense of why this would mean so much to them. So there's more of a chance for impact to then happen. Because definitely setting the tone is a big one.
And I think it can depend the subgenre you're in for that, because if you are in something that's very heavily fantasy or sci-fi, then sometimes you do need that bit of space to set a little bit of the world building, so that when that inciting incident does happen, it makes sense as to why this is different from normal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's got to be a contrast. Yeah, I mean, it's true if you have a protagonist who is frequently in battle, and they have a relationship with that and that might change, then you might start off with a battle if it's kind of like, okay, that's part of their normal world. So that's a possible way to approach it. But yeah, most novels that you would want to build up to that and give the readers time to sort of understand the backgrounds to why this thing's happening, why it means so much to the protagonist.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that Jen and Phil are saying about having that spark being the opening, and that's where kind of you know where to start with. Because for me, when I'm actually doing the writing, that spark for me is the ending of the book, and then I come back and write the beginning.
Oh, how I wish.
I almost always know the end. If it's a novel length, opposite if it's a short story, but for novel length, the end is my spark point, and then I come back round to where does this need to begin.
That's funny, because that's quite, in a way, that's similar to me in that I quite often, I'll want to write something for the beginning because I've got a bit of that spark, but then I know already I'm going to have to rewrite it, because ultimately I want to be able to write something of the end, because once I know what's happening in the end, then I know what to do with the beginning. So I'm quite light touch, low expectations about what I'm getting down for the beginning. I'm like, this is going to change. It's all fine.
Yep. It will be edited.
So intriguing. No, couldn't do that. If I know the end, what's the point in writing the book?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry. For me, if I know the end, I'm on a journey as much as the reader. And whilst I do plan, but I still have to, I only plan significantly in the last third of a book. What that then means is that right now I'm writing the third book of a trilogy. I have had to significantly plan this last book because it's the last third of the story.
Yeah.
I had actually written the scene that is 2/3 the way through this book when I was 70% of the way through book one. I had no idea how I was getting there, but I certainly hadn't written the end. But given the characters are on completely different planets, I kind of needed to know they were going to arrive in the same place at some point. So I've written the point where they meet. Still not the end of the book, but I've written that point where they meet. So I know where the 3 storylines mesh. That was it. That's all I had towards the end of it. But yeah, if I know the end, I literally get bored writing because I know the end now. So what's the point?
See, I don't know how they're going to get to the end. The journey is still there, and my characters will just decide stuff in the middle. Like, as long as you get to this point at the end, however you want to get there in the middle is entirely up to you. You just need to get here by the end.
Well, I'm going to throw a wild card in there and say James Scott Bell has also written a book called Write Your Novel from the Middle, and it's completely genius. And it's about trying to work out what is the crux of this mirror moment that the protagonist has, and he suggests trying to draft something about the middle, whether you actually get it right or whatever, but just work out what is going to happen in this so-called mirror moment where the character faces whatever's going on inside them, which is ultimately I suppose at the base of the reasons why the whole plot happens. Work that out and then just write from either direction, whichever way you want to get there.
So what
I'm
we're
all for a
saying
bit
there
of
is,
chaos. I'm all for a bit of chaos. I just have to label stuff obsessively because I do jump about quite a lot. Yeah.
so you can begin your story at any point, really. You can begin it knowing the end, you can begin it not knowing the end. Whatever works for you is absolutely fine. Everyone is clearly very different in their processes, which is good. It means we all write different stories in the end.
But you do end up circling back, whether you've written the end, the beginning, or the middle first. You are coming back to that 250-word thing because you know it has to be something that will hook a reader in, because they're not going to read the end first. I mean, some people do, but I judge them.
But then that's it. You'll come back and you'll make it in the magic of editing. You'll make it, all look like you knew exactly what was going on the whole time. So if you're stuck at the beginning, try not to put too much pressure on it, because you'll just come back and you'll polish it up. It's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The whole thing's going to be edited. So when you're starting out, you're going to come back to it regardless of whether it's good or trash fire.
Yeah.
And then you can make it shiny and polished and pretty, and it'll all look beautiful. And then you won't really mind what sort of trash fire it was when you left it. As long as it's a finished trash fire, you can make it pretty afterwards.
Yeah.
You can polish the first line so it's the shiniest thing ever.
That's
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
So Phil, you would has already thrown some of these out at us, because our next talking point was going to be if you had any like hard rules for like the beginnings of your own work, or if there's like a winning formula that you thought about for beginning. So Phil, you've already sort of touched on some that your writing tutor has given you with the 3 elements that should be in a first, or one of 3 elements, I guess, should be in a first line in that first 250 words. Is there anything else that you have, Phil, before we throw it open to everybody else, or are those 2 things kind of the main things that you look for in the beginning when you're writing something?
Yeah, no, it's very much that. But it's weird because I think what's happened is that those 3 things now are so ingrained in my thinking. I can't do anything else. It's like, that's become my, the way that my synapses work. You want ideas, yeah, this is the idea you're going to get, because this is the discipline that your brain now works on. And I really can't try, and I have tried other ways of doing it, just because other people have recommended good books, like we've just been talking about, the sort of the writer's manual kind of books, and I've experimented with those, and it always comes back to those 3 points, and that opening, and that spark of inspiration, which I cannot emphasize enough, is the crucial bit. I don't know about the rest of you guys. For me, one of the things that is a crucial factor that now I'll put a huge amount of emphasis on, I have to wake up with the idea. It has to occur to me during the middle of the night.
Oh gosh, I come up with complete nonsense in the middle of the night.
There are times that I'll wake up
when you're cleaning your
it's
teeth,
there.
something like that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Or in the shower.
Yeah, I mean, there is a scene that I still can see as clear as if I'd woken up and seen it, which is a scene from the Gates series, which is actually a scene that doesn't happen till book 2. That wasn't the beginning of the story, but that was an image I had in my head. And I think in one of my 12 beginnings did actually include that as the start, and then realized that wasn't actually the main character at all. But I think for me, I'm sorry, I'm probably controversially, I don't read writer's manuals. I don't read any of those books. They fry me. I can't do it. I am me. I don't follow a pattern. I don't want to be predictable. I've read so many books that follow pattern. Here we go. Here's this. Bang, bang, bang. I know the book. I'm bored. I want to write things that don't follow the pattern. So I don't do that. And I can pick up the ones that do, and they annoy me, because that's just because I literally read for my entire sanity through most of my teens, and I was a voracious reader, and I just see patterns. I see patterns in films, even in the opening sequence. My husband hates me for it. Is it Shutter Island, where the guy's on the boat? He literally got on the boat and I went, oh, he's a convict. That was it, done. Film over for me. So I don't read those sorts of things. What I do try and do is, if I'm writing a folklore-based thing, I tend to go with the scene setting, because I know that I want to put the reader into the mind, like Anna's kind of saying, you're building the world, you're putting it in there, you're showing that. You're giving the reader what they're expecting. Oh, we're in this kind of beautiful fantasy environment. There's light, there's play, there's this, that, the other. They will be slower. If I'm going for something that's a bit more city-based, it's going to be much more fast. It's going to be much more in there. And short stories, so I'm sure Thea probably has way more experience again than me on this, from what you're saying. Every word of those 250 has to count for something.
Yes.
Because you've got a whole chapter
Yeah.
in a book, potentially, before someone zones out. That is your whole short story.
Yeah.
So they have to weigh so much more. Every word has to do 3 times more for you when you're writing a short story. So that counts so much more.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't have hard and fast rules, but I have thematic ways I begin depending upon the kind of world I'm writing in.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Very similar to you. That's very much, I want to ground in that setting and in that person's POV, because I write third person, but I tend to write quite close point of view. And so what I want to do in that first half a page is show something of the world and the atmosphere. Like, is it this dark, creepy, alternate universe where everything's terrible? I read a lot of dystopian things. Is it a future where everything's gone wrong and we're filled with pollution and war, kind of condensing down a whole world into half a page, but through the eyes of the person who you're supposed to connect to as the reader? I want the reader to see like what's their emotional response to this world as well.
Yeah, that feels like, you know, a similar kind of thing like you were saying earlier, Anna, about you know, sort of having that initial context of what the sort of status quo is, so that you can, when you start tearing it up and throwing it out the window, you know, the readers have more context for that. Oh, that's not how things are supposed to be.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm thinking, is there anything else I can add to this? Because you guys have come up with so many things. I think probably the only thing I might add to it is I quite like to, it's not necessarily, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, and like an unanswered question. So I like to give, to withhold a little bit of information. And of course that can take any form depending on the context, the setting, or whatever's going on. I think there's nothing quite like a little bit of information that is withheld, just to add that bit of mystery. So even if there aren't loads of mysteries to unfold in the story, or things for the reader to find out bit by bit, even then I think it's still worth having that little piece of information withheld, just at least within the first few lines, that's kind of what raises the question in the reader's mind, and makes them, you know, want to read on initially, I think.
One thing that Jen's probably going to hate, but I love doing, is tiny little bit of foreshadowing.
No, I love foreshadowing. I just like it to be subtle, not slap me across the face so I know the answer.
Yeah. There are 2 lines in the opening of The Hiding that are going to be very relevant in book 4, which is the final book of the series and I'm writing at the moment. And I think they seem pretty innocuous. We'll see what people say when they read book 4.
I love that. Yeah, that's really cool. No, foreshadowing's great. I'm totally for foreshadowing, especially if it's innocuous foreshadowing. And then you look at it afterwards and you're like, oh, that's the kind of foreshadowing that you sit there and you go, oh my God, that meant something. Oh wow. When you just have that Lego brick, everything falling into place moment, that is awesome. No, I like foreshadowing. I just don't want to know it's foreshadowing before it's foreshadowing.
The best foreshadowing is not until you come to reread it do you realize that it's foreshadowing, or you know, it clicks later.
It's called three shadowing.
Sorry,
what did you say?
It's called three shadowing.
Wow.
It's not, I've just made this up. No.
we thought it was another nugget of
We're just
wisdom.
like, here we go, Phil, a piece of noble information. Amazing.
Yeah.
Trust in you.
We're covering a lot of things to do there, and you know, have touched on a lot, and a lot of different processes, which I think is good. I think it is very nice to see how different writers approach these things, because you can see so much advice which is like, you have to do X, you know, this is the way that it is done. So let's move on now to things that you think should not be done in beginning. So like maybe common pitfalls. You know, obviously we're all I think, you know, hitting speculative fiction as well, so potentially looking at that, a lot of our content and, you know, our audience, I think, is probably speculative fiction writers. So one of the common things can be like info dumping, and I know, Anna, you were just saying about, you know, leaving some mysteries for the reader to discover later on in the book, but how do you strike that balance then of giving them just enough information? Again, like we have already touched on, you know, like they have to have that context. If you just say, oh, there aren't any dragons, they need to know that there were dragons, or there should be dragons, or something, rather than just like, yep, that sounds like a usual day in London. So how do you sort of balance that? Yeah, that element of giving some world building with that, but not too much.
I think in a way, maybe you need to think about the situation that the protagonist is in that moment, in that scene. And some things are just going to be in the background, sort of by the by, sort of quite basic details. You'll find ways to kind of sneak them in, just to sort of provide that background context. And also just sometimes you just have to kind of step back and think, okay, what is it that the reader needs to know right now? Because yeah, there is always that element, as I was saying, about the the mysteries to be to unfold. You don't want to give the reader everything on a plate to start with. Why not, make a mystery out of some things and just let it sort of unfurl, I guess, over time, and when things become relevant. But yeah, it is tricky, because there's always that, if you've got a little back history or whatever, just maybe type it up in a separate document, and that way it's there. You've had your brain splurge, it's all there, and then you can pull things out of it as and when it needs to be.
Scratch that itch that you needed to get that stuff out of your brain.
Yeah,
and
just get it down, and then it's just there for you, rather than throwing it at the reader.
I think most writers know more than the reader ever sees. And sometimes it comes through in very subtle, just little background things. Or sometimes the reader just never needs to know it, and you just have this information and you're like, I know this.
Yeah.
As you say, just giving out what is enough. I think it's hard to tell what's enough for different people, though, because I have literally had feedback on the exact same version of my opening chapter, where one person said, I love this, it's really atmospheric, I can really picture the world, I can really understand the character well. And another person wrote, I have no idea what's going on, I don't even know who we're talking about, what kind of place is this anyway, I don't get it. I'm like, this is exactly the same piece of writing.
Yeah.
I think it depends what they, as a reader, read as well. And there are people who are reading fantasy more now, who maybe have come from the romance genre because they've come in through romantasy, who have very much, there are rules in romantasy, and some of fantasy doesn't follow those same rules and those same plot points and the same sequence that there has to be for a fantasy novel, for a romance novel to classify as romance, not a fantasy romance. So there are certain rules, and there have been numerous panels on numerous things about these rules and what is expected. Happy ever after, the certain thing, the trope, what they see. And I think sometimes because of those rules and framework, some people have an expectation that certain things will be laid out in the first chapter, especially if they're newer to the genre. And as a result of that, they can get lost very easily, because they're expecting these set pieces to be put into place for the rest of the novel to roll out. And that is absolutely no disrespect to anybody who loves romance. I have a lot of very good friends who love it, who write it and things like that. But they are very strong on the sense that this is a plot point, this is a sequence. It does have to be built in a specific way in order to satisfy the people who want to buy these books. And I think when you've got your beta readers, you need to be aware that if you're getting a group of readers from a range of different backgrounds, you're going to have that sort of feedback. And you're going to have that anyway, because some people like to puzzle. And some people love to solve a puzzle. And some people just want everything given to them in the start and laid out, and they don't want to have to work at it.
I have this problem with my editor even. We disagree on how much I need to actually tell people. And she'll put comments on things saying, I'm not sure if this is real or not. And I'm like, you're not supposed to be able to tell if it's real or not.
And that matches with whose perspective you're writing, doesn't it? I mean, I tend to write a lot of first person. So from my perspective, why would that person be telling you about their daily life, about this, about that, about the other? It's completely false. It wouldn't be. You wouldn't walk around through the street going, oh, look at this and look at that. That's just the world you live in. So you have to write it through the experience of what they're doing, where they're going. Like Anna was saying, the little details, the things that are in there. Absolutely. Instead. And so I don't know. I think that what often puts me off with the info dump is that there is that kind of I don't think we get the big info dumps as much anymore. I think people tend to avoid it.
Yeah.
I think they're much better at not doing that, or putting it in through a conversation, but drip by drip, only when they need to know it. Do they need to know it at the start of chapter 1 to set the scene? If they don't, wait till closer to the time they do. Doesn't need to be right when they do. That's just like too artificial. As long as it's there just before they need to know it by some natural mechanism, it's fine. It doesn't need to be there at the start, and it shouldn't feel false to the person whose POV you're writing.
Yeah. I completely echo that, Jen. For me, I've said this repeatedly, that one of the things I've discovered about my writing is that it reflects the fact that I've got an acting background, and I inhabit the characters that I write. They, they're there. The voices are in my head, which sounds disturbing, doesn't it? But they really are, they're in mid. When I write dialogue, I can hear them, speaking, because I'm inhabiting those characters. So there's, to answer your question, Alex, there are two things. First of all, that for me are essential near the beginning of it. One is very much what Jen's just said, that for me, it's about establishing to the reader something about that character that gives them a first impression of who they are. As you might meet at a bus stop or at a party or wherever, just something that you immediately get a sense of who they are, which might be unreliable. And I like to throw that in sometimes to completely mislead the reader. But there has to be sort of something that gives them a sense of who they are within that very first page, an action, a sentence, a statement. But then the second thing that is also important for me is that I have to treat the setting as another character. And it's about how the main protagonist is reacting to that character of the setting, and that they will therefore pick up on. And Jen's just hit upon it just now. The info dump isn't necessary, because when you are looking at that setting, something about it, whether it's the moon in the sky, whether it's the light falling on a puddle, whatever it is, that's what that character sees, and that's what's truly important. It's the reaction of that character to the other character that just happens to be the world around them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I feel like we're all hitting on a lot of advice for beginnings that really is applicable to the whole, all of the storytelling of looking through the through the lens of character to the world. Is if you can do that throughout as well as in the beginning, especially, it's going to help strengthen the story. I wanted to talk about different kinds of writing, like the short stories. Obviously, we have some people have written a lot of short stories here. But before we do that, because we just kind of zoned in on infodump specifically there, is there anything else that you think you would want to flag with people to avoid in beginnings, or like maybe prune out of their stories if they can, or just things to be aware of?
I've sort of controversial today. Please don't put your
we love the controversial. This is what we'll put on social media. It's fine.
And please don't put all your definitions at the beginning for your whole world building, because if Amazon or Kindle or whatever else you're buying it from starts on that page and there's 10 pages of those, you're going to lose the reader before they get to the first line. Because if they've got sitting there thinking they've got to read 10 pages of what these words mean and what these words are and what does this translate to and the rest of it, put it at the end. Put a link at the beginning if you must, underneath the beginning, saying there's an appendix. But please don't put it at the start. It's important to you. As the other said, write it, put it somewhere else. If you really feel you need to include it, whack it on your website. Put it somewhere on the back of your book. Give a hyperlink to it, but please let the reader start with the story. Sorry.
That's an incredibly practical tip for indie authors and creators as well. Thinking about the step beyond once the story's finished, the experience of the reader beyond just the story itself, and how you open up the ebook or the preview, even, because as you say, if they check in the preview and all they see is these definitions, and hopefully not with too many apostrophes and dashes and things as well in the names, but
don't need a map. Start me on a map. That's great. That's grounding. Fab. Love a map. But just don't start me with an entire glossary. Sorry. That's my biggest gripe. I love prologues. I hate glossaries at the front.
Is there anything else anybody wanted to sort of I've want to use the word rant now that Jenny says sort of ranted about those, but
I'll just leave now.
no, we love it. Please stay.
Can't think of anything else.
No, that's good. I think we're covering a lot of ground, so I just wanted to make sure that
really hoping nobody's got a glossary at the front. Now I've said that. My apologies if you do. If I haven't put it in, there's one hiding somewhere.
Right, I'm just moving mine to the back now. It's fine.
I've seen yours.
So I say we've got Thea, you mentioned that you've got a lot of short stories in various collections. So I'd like to also engage with the different, I want to say formats, but different sort of lengths of stories. And we've already talked about all those 250 words, really having to do a lot more heavy lifting in short stories than in novels, because you have less space. But do you approach those beginnings differently depending on the length of story? And I think you mentioned earlier that you kind of start at the end for a novel and maybe start at the beginning for a short story.
Yeah, I always start at the beginning for a short story. Sometimes I know what it's going to be about. Sometimes I don't. Some of my short stories have come about just from having that spark of, this is a cool opening line. What does it lead to? Which tends to be more of a short story than a novel thing for me. And also different kinds of short stories. So I've got standalone short stories, but then I've got a collection of short stories that take place in the Seer of York universe. And I wrote that series in entirely the wrong order, because I wrote the short stories, then I wrote book 2, and then I wrote book 1, which comes before the short stories. So I didn't even start at the beginning of the flipping series. Some of the short stories were character building exercises, and again of just going, this is an interesting piece of folklore. What happens if I plonk these characters into the middle of this happening? How will they react to it?
Yeah.
But it is, I think, important to get those reactions very quickly in a short story. You have to start much closer to them having the surprise or the whatever that inciting incident is going to be, and you have to ground the reality very quickly. I tend to like to use a lot of senses, not just what people can see, what they can smell, what they can feel, hear, etc. Because again, it's getting you very close in that person's head very quickly. You said you've done quite a few short stories, Jen?
So similar in that respect that I tend to go for, but my short stories are almost always first person, although the books mix, but that puts you right in their head. You're smelling the dew, you're seeing this, you're smelling the mist, whatever it might be. But yes, trying to establish that very quickly, I think, is very much the case. But and trying to, because you've just got that short space. I mean, sometimes I find short story beginnings, one of my favorite short story beginnings, I absolutely cannot read out on this panel. Because it is from I Want That Twink Obliterated. And if you know that collection, you'll know why I can't read them out on the panel. Certainly the first story of the first book, of the first, anyway. But yes, it's the first short story in it. It's a very dramatic, very impactful one. And you sit there and you go, okay, this is where this whole book's going, because it's an anthology of collections and they've hit it with that line. And I do think that they do have to be very quiet. They often have to be very fast paced. You can do a slow, gentle short story, but you run the risk with a gentle short story of it just feeling like a slice of life. So there has to be that much more definition of a beginning and a very much a clear cut layout as to where it's going. And maybe this is where, like, your question, your hook, Anna's hung question, has to be ready to be answered very much quickly. You've got to be ready to move in on it. Lots of ums.
Yeah, there has to be more of that like immediate purpose, I find. Whereas with a novel, the protagonist might not have that immediate purpose in the first couple of pages because they haven't reached the inciting incident yet. In a lot of short stories, they already do have a purpose more, I find, just from reading as well.
You might be almost telling just from the novel the chapter of the inciting incident. Almost,
because you do still want an ending often.
Yes, you do still need the ending, but you almost have that big boom and collapse. But yeah, every word has to do so much more work in a short story because you're trying to get it all in. And some short story requests are 2,000 words.
Yeah. And
so depending upon what you're writing, 2,000 words is not a lot to get it in. They tend to fit between 2 and 7, I find. I tend to end up about 3.5 to 4, fairly similar to a chapter length for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you know you've got to fit it in that same space that you would in a arc within a chapter. But I wrote the skin very much as though each chapter was a bit like a short story, which is something it has been remarked on by people reading it. So I wrote each one and each chapter almost in the style of an individual short story, even though they weren't. So every single chapter had the beginning, the crest, and the end all the way through each of them. And they had gaps in between. I didn't do the travel in between. They were there. And Phil's nodding. Yeah. So it was a strategic way of deliberately trying to write it in that way, like a collection of mythology stories that were all put together, but to make one story.
Yeah,
That's fine.
So
Short stories are a good place to have that experimentation as well. Like you're saying, you mostly write yours in first. I've done some in first. I normally write in third. I've done some in present tense. I normally write in past tense. So if you are, especially with a novel, if you're not sure where to begin it, trying out different styles in a short story way and then coming back round to the novel once you've found a bit more of that voice can be really helpful.
yeah, I agree. Definitely. Short stories, even, I mean, a novella is a bit longer, but testing out new things, new ideas, short stories are a brilliant place to go. They're a brilliant place to clear your head as well. If you're struggling with a big story or another novel and you just like, it's dark and it's bleak and you just want to write something completely different, then just spitting out a short story can be really good fun, a complete mind cleanse to write something completely different and then go back to it.
Absolutely.
I think that was my point I was about to make. Sorry, Anna, go on.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say that I think that's one of the things. I don't write that many short stories, but when I do, it's entirely because of I've got stuck somewhere, in terms of understanding a character or, the world setting or whatever. And I like to just then go and jump into a short story or two and write those. And by the time I've done that, then it's that mind cleansing exercise. And writing a short story is a really good discipline, as we're all saying, but it also can very often, sort of mean that it helps develop your own thinking for the novel. So it serves a double purpose really, and I think short stories are great for that. So if you get writer's block or you just simply need ideas, write a lot of short stories and just sort of see where they take you.
Very much so. I mean, yeah, on my brainstorming podcast is pretty much all about short stories. I love longer works as well, but it's very much a fun experimental space, and absolutely it's just liberating. I am pretty much a discovery writer, but pulling in bits and bobs from wherever over the years as I've sort of worked out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. But yeah, it's a great place to sort of as you were saying, Phil, to get unstuck, because I mean you can learn so much about quite quickly what your own sort of themes and sort of almost sort of obsessions, like what are the things that I really want to write about, and it's a way to sort of pull it out of your unconscious mind. Just write a load of short stories, what sparks you off, and then observing that can really help you work out what is going to excite you about this longer plot. So they're a great tool for that. But yeah,
very much.
Yeah, again, I think we've dived like into our beginning advice, but also applying this to every aspect of writing as well, which is has been great. I mean, that's it for our prepared remarks. We've, I think, smashed through all these bits of advice for beginnings. So is there anything else anybody wants to discuss about beginnings, or we can just sort of wrap this up? Yeah.
Anyone want to be brave enough to share a beginning or opening line?
Well, one of their own. Fear.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, that could be. I like that.
You can have the very first line, the very first line of the last book of the Gates trilogy.
Go on then.
Oh, an
They
exclusive.
attacked at night.
Again, full
Whether
of
it was the
intrigue.
scent of their dead kin drifting on the wind, or the hundreds of people we led through the territory hours earlier, Darren could not guess, nor did he have time to speculate.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to reading the rest of that.
I've got one here that is I haven't even sent this to anyone yet. Oh no, that's not true. So I've sent it to 2 people, just the opening chapter. And this is the opening sentence. My story begins with the dissolution of my bird bath.
I love it. Anyone else want to share any first lines? I can share.
Perhaps that's it's very much I'm experimenting, playing around with a sort of a Douglas Adams, Jasper Ford story. So hence the surreal quality of that one.
I can get surreal. I'll give you the first line of Eye for Immortality. This is what it means to be an artist, to reach, to be the reaching. That's all you need to know about that.
Very philosophical.
Yeah, I like
It is,
that.
isn't it?
I'll do the first line of The Hiding. York was famous for its ghosts, but Harper had seen too many demons to fear rumours and trickery.
I love that. I love that.
Nice. I seeing as I will also put myself on the altar of first lines. So this is as it stands, the first line of what I'm currently writing. So Dymas woke from familiar nightmares to the smell of battle. Full stop.
Lovely. Like that.
Don't worry.
Got the waking from a dream without having the waking from a dream.
Right. And the Allosaurus comes in very quickly after that, so it's fine.
Absolutely. I was expecting nothing less.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I think that's all we have to talk. I'm sure we could keep going, but all we have time for, really. So what leaves me just to say thank you again to all of our brilliant panelists. I think we really have started at the beginning and branched out into some really great advice that applies to any aspect of storytelling. So once again, we'll go clockwise, but if you could just tell people like where to find you and your works, and then we will greatly encourage everybody to check you out. You're obviously very wise, which is why you are here. So your stories are also all amazing. So please go and check everybody's work out. So Jenny, could I start with you, please? Where can people find you and your work?
You can find me easiest at jehannaford.com. And obviously that then has links at the bottom that bounces me out to whichever social media is your poison, because these days it's not as simple as one of them. And there are link trees on all my social medias once you find one. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Phil, what about you? Where can people find you in your work?
Yeah, same thing for me. If you look for Phil Speculates on any of the usual sort of social medias, and in my profile, you'll find my link tree there, which will take you to my books.
Perfect. And Anna, what about you?
Yep, if you just go to annatizard.com, you can listen to the podcast there, you can look at my books there, you can send me words for the Socks of Destiny to be pulled out at random that will generate the next writing prompt on the show. So yeah, anyone can do that on my play page. So just get on there and interact.
Amazing. And Thea, where can people find you and your works?
I'm Alethea R. Lyons on most social media. And that's also my link tree as well, which has links to all my books, to arcs for the one coming out soon, and to all the short stories on KU.
Amazing. Lovely. And you can find Spotlight Indie obviously here at the Spotlight Indie YouTube, but we're spotlightindie.co.uk and on the various social medias as well. So stick around for this weekend. We are only just getting started here at the beginning. So today we've got crowdfunding your creative project later at 7 p.m. We've got understanding subgenres at 8 p.m. and then at 9 I'll be back for a live Be Gone session with Ella McRae, Thomas J. Devons and Simon Kewen. And so find out what things get under their skin and what things they want to make Be Gone. But again, please just join me in saying thank you again to our amazing panelists. So thank you. Please go and find all their stuff. It's all fantastic. And just thank you again. And we will see you soon, no doubt. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.